Hello, in this video, we will be going through some potential errors which you could face when using the base case lanes. Before watching this video, I would highly recommend you to watch our previous video where we explain how you can set up the base case lanes. So here, I have the same dataset as the previous video, but I have changed some of the base case volumes here, and I have saved this dataset and uploaded it to the data navigator. In the data navigator, we can see that our dataset has multiple errors. So let's investigate. So it says that base case volumes into the resource are more than base case volumes out of the resource. Similarly, here it says that base case volumes into the resource are less than the base case volumes out of the resource. So to get more information about this issue, you can come into this panel and then you can get a better overview. So here it's telling us that for the Munich CDC, the base case volume which is being shipped into the resource is less than the volume which is being shipped out of the resource. So as you can see, we are shipping 1800 into the resource, but then we are asking it to ship out 1801 out of the resource, which obviously doesn't make sense. Similarly, in case of Paris CDC, we are shipping it a volume of 1201. So we are sending that much into the resource, but then the volume which is being shipped out of the Paris CDC is only 1200. To prevent such an error, you need to ensure that the base case volumes are consistent. For example, here you can see that Budapest has base case volumes of 800 tons of candy and Rome has base case volumes for 1000 tons of candy, and they both source their candies from Munich CDC. Then the base case volume at Munich CDC should be equal to the base case volume at Budapest and Rome, which happens to be 1800. Similarly, Zurich has a base case volume of 500 tons of candy, and Nantes has a base case volume of 700 tons of candy. Then the base case volume at the Paris CDC should be equal to the sum of their base case volumes, which happens to be 1200. So the base case volume in these places has to be exactly the sum of their base case volumes. It cannot be more or less than 1800 tons in the case of Munich, and it cannot be more or less than 1200 tons in the case of Paris CDC. Similarly, the base case volume which flows from the production to the DCs should be equal to the base case volumes which flow from the DCs to the customers which they serve. So in this example, we know that Munich has a base case volume of 1800 and Paris has a base case volume of 1200 tons which flows to their customers. Then the production facility must send exactly 1800 tons to Munich and exactly 1200 tons to Paris to meet these base case volumes. And finally, if your model is using bill of materials to produce products in the production facility, then the base case volumes of the raw materials should be exactly the amount required to produce the base case volumes out of the production facility. So in this example, the base case volumes out of the production facility is the sum of the base case volumes going into the two CDCs, which is a sum of 1800 and 1200, which is 3000 tons. And in our bill of material data, we only have one raw material, sugar, which is required to produce one candy. So that is why one handling unit of sugar will create one candy. So in this case, the base case volumes flowing from the raw material to the production facility is 3000 tons, because to produce 1 ton of candy, we need 1 ton of sugar, and therefore to produce 3000 tons of candy, we need 3000 tons of sugar, and this tons of sugar cannot be more or less than 3000. So now I will fix the base case volumes in this column to make them consistent. So here it should be 3000, here it should be 1200, and finally here it should be 1000. So now the base case volumes are consistent and will sum up equally. So now when I go and load this data set into the data navigator, there will be no more errors like before, and you can save and run the model. Another type of issue which you might run into when using the base case lanes is that the base case volumes are violating the capacity constraint. So in this example, we have defined a base case volume of 3000 out of the supplier, but then in the model, we have also set a maximum supplier capacity of 2500. Similarly, for the DCs also, we have set a maximum capacity of 1000, but then we are sending in and out base case volumes of greater than 1000. To prevent this issue from occurring, you need to ensure that your base case volumes are within the capacity constraints, or that you set up the capacity constraints in such a way that they will be able to accommodate the base case volumes which you wish to use. So in this model, we got an error saying that the base case volumes for the supplier and the DCs are more than the capacity constraints of these locations. So if I go to supplier data, I need to make sure that the capacity here should be able to accommodate the base case volumes which I wish to use, so I will just increase it. Similarly, I'll go to the DCs and I will also increase the capacity here so that they will also be able to accommodate the base case volumes which we wish to use in this model. Now, when I reload this dataset into the data navigator, I will no longer have a data validation saying that the base case volumes are more than the capacity constraints of these resources or the suppliers. You will also get an error if your base case volumes don't match the demand you set up for your customers. So in this model, we are getting a data validation that for the customers at Zurich and Nantes, we are sending base case volumes which are not matching the demand. So for example, for Zurich, we're sending a base case volume of 720, but the demand of the customer there is only 700. And for Nantes, we are sending a base case volume of 450, but the demand for the customer is actually 500. To fix this error, you need to ensure that the base case volumes which you're shipping to the customer is exactly the same as the demand which you set up for these customers in the customer product data sheet. So here you can see that the demand at Zurich is 700 and the demand at Nantes is 500. So then the base case volumes being shipped to these customers should be the same. So here I will make it 700 for Zurich. And here I'll make it 500 for Nantes. Now, when I will save this dataset and upload it to the data navigator, I will no longer have an error saying that the base case volumes at the customer does not match the demand set in the customer product data sheet. It might be that you do not wish to or don't have such exact numbers for the base case volume, or you want to use historical averages. In such a situation, you can just leave the base case volumes blank and instead go to the transport constraint data. Here, you can enter a certain range using the minimum and maximum capacity for the same lanes. And then, when you enforce the base case constraints in the model and run it, the model will optimize you using the base case volumes which will lie within these ranges. It is also possible to have both the base case volumes and the capacities in the transport constraint data. This way, you can enforce the base case volumes in running the base case scenario and keep the capacity constraints when you're trying to run an optimized scenario with these lanes. However, you need to ensure that these capacity limits will be able to accommodate the base case volumes. That means that the minimum capacity should not be more than the base case volumes and the maximum capacity should not be less than the base case volumes. In the base case lanes, you should avoid using groupings under any of the attributes. So here, I have a more detailed dataset where instead of one, I now have 3 different candies. You can see that this customer orders all 3 candies. So then, instead of creating a grouping, you should create a base case lane separately for each of the candy. In your dataset, you might have some type of grouping for all of your products. In this example, the 3 candies are grouped into a product called all final products. And then you might be tempted to use a grouping like this in the base case lane, where instead of candy 1, candy 2, candy 3, you put all final products. and then you put a base case volume, which is the sum of these three products. And then you might be tempted to just use a lane like this. However, when you open this dataset in the data navigator, you will get an error saying that the base case volumes are greater than the demand at the customer location. This is because when you grouped the products and summed up the base case volumes, the app read it as if every candy has a base case volume of 184,739 units instead of the demand which is specified for each of these candies at this location. That is why you should not use groupings in the base case lanes and instead have a separate lane for each of the products. So just get rid of the grouping and now you will no longer have an error like this. Similar logic also applies for location grouping. So here I have some base case lanes where the two CDCs are sending the same product candy 1 to the 4 different LDCs. So the Utrecht CDC sends products to Paris CDC and Madrid CDC, whereas the Munich CDC sends the product to the Bologna CDC and Vienna CDC. And then it might be that you have some location grouping like this, where I have a group CDC, which includes both the Utrecht and Munich CDC. And similarly, I have a location grouping called LDC, which includes the 4 LDCs. And now I might be tempted to create a lane in the base case lane where instead of using these locations individually, I just put the product and then I put CDC to LDC. And then again here, I just add the base case volumes of these 4 lanes. But then again, you will get the same error because what this lane will do is that from every CDC, so that means from Utrecht CDC and Munich CDC, it will send 491,850 units of base case volumes to the 4 LDCs, and that is not what we want it to do, and that will lead to an error. So that is why in the base case lanes, it is also advised to not use any location grouping. In the Excel template, you will probably create some lanes using grouping to find the most optimized scenario. However, if this lane has a different cost than the base case lanes, then you will get a warning for duplicate. For example, here I have a lane secondary transport in which I use the groupings of the CDCs and the demand, and then here I have inputted cost per distance 0.8. However, I also have these base case lanes which are from a specific CDC to a specific customers, and they have a cost of 1. And these lanes technically are part of grouping made here. So here in the data navigator, you can clearly see what type of warning you will get about duplicates when you upload such a data set. So let's look here. So here it's saying that there is a duplicate for the attribute cost per distance for the combination secondary transport candy from Munich CDC to Rome. So what is happening is that the first value it is getting is of 0.8, which we had inputted in the lane with a grouping, and the second value which it is getting is 1, which we inputted in the base case lane, which we made from Munich CDC to Rome. And you can save this data set and run it in the network design app, but then what will happen is that no matter what you do, it will always select the value 1 for these lanes because we have specified the cost per distance 1 from in 2 locations, and because they're on the lower level and the 0.8 was on a higher grouping level, then no matter whether it is base case or not a base case, it will always select the cost per distance as 1 in these lanes. So in case you first wish to create a base case scenario, then what you can do is you can just save this model and run it with these costs. And then after that, maybe you wish to create a new optimized scenario with your new cost. Then what you can do is either you can delete the cost here and make them the same as 0.8 and not enforce the base case scenario when you're running it, or you can just simply delete these lanes and then instead only use this lane and it will be able to accommodate with the new cost. So I hope this video was useful for you guys in figuring out all the issues that you are facing with your base case lanes, and I hope that now you will be able to run them and create your base case scenarios.